trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith would be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith would be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith would be made stronger in the presence of my Savior.
Hello, everybody. This is the Deacon Talks, and like I told you before, if it's not on Friday at 7:30, it's not the Jackson podcast. However, the same people will be on it. Right now, I'm waiting on William Federer, who's done a 3-part series on Iran, to come in and talk to us and give us a biblical perspective on what's going on right now in the Middle East. I'm also waiting for the professor, my Uncle Kevin. Hopefully, the next lieutenant governor of the great state of Maryland, Tyrone Keys, will come on. Him and Ed Howe are the Republican candidates in that race. Also, Ted Holly and maybe also Minister Denzel. Apostle Jolly has to work tonight, and so he won't be on. I also sent something to Pastor Damon, and hopefully Pastor Damon will come on. So as I wait for everybody to come on the panel, I got some clips. Let's start. Let's start with the first one. First one is Bill Federer. First clip is Bill Federer. And Check this out.
In January of 2026, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei cracked down on Iranians wanting freedom. An Iranian refugee estimates that the regime has killed thousands and more than 330,000 injured, with most victims reportedly under the age of 30. More than 24,000 protesters had been jailed. They will not be coming back, the refugee said. They will kill them in jail. Despite persecutions, Christianity is the fastest growing religion in Iran. Billy Hallowell of CBN reported God is using dreams to speak to Iranians all the time. Iranians are open to dreams, and God uses them to speak to them. Sadly, conversion to Christianity can come at a great cost. It is illegal for them to convert to Christianity. It is illegal for them to own a Bible. Retribution for violating these restrictions could mean anything from a business being shut down to prison, torture, or worse. In January of 2026,
Wow. That was Bill Federer. Basically, um, explaining what was going on just up into um, the airstrikes and the Israeli strikes and attacks on um, the Iranians. I do have a couple of other clips. As we're waiting on William to come on, I went live early, so once they come in, we can just get started. But here's some other videos. Here's some other videos that they're not talking about. Here's the first one. This is Iranians celebrating about what's
Grow up
going
in a
on.
country where I was brainwashed to say death to America. The same country, how ironic, the same country that I wish death saved my life 3 times and now helped my people in Iran. They are celebrating. They are celebrating out of joy. This morning I woke up, I'm like, for the first time, I woke up. Always, every morning we wake up when we hear Allahu Akbar, one person get killed, executed in Iran. But this morning was the morning of millions of Iranians seeing justice. Ali Khamenei is dead, is gone. And this is called justice. And this is what should have been done years ago by the United States of America. Thank you, President Trump, for actually taking decisive action. This is how a true leadership look like. And I know that. Like people like Zoran Mamdani, people like Ilhan Omar, they hate President Trump and they shifted their hate from President Trump to the people of Iran. They're sympathizing with our killers and saying no to war. Really? You're lecturing us Iranians about war? We have experienced war being waged on us by Islamic Republic. I am very happy. This is the first step, and we believe that the next step should be help from Europeans all over the world to help the people of Iran to end this regime. I am so happy that I am alive, and I see that Ali Khamenei is gone.
You know, Masi, one of the things that has been mentioned, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, but is opening up the prisons and allowing the people in them to be free.
Wow. Like I said, that's just one of them. One of the clips I have. I have a couple of more. Check this one out. This is clip 2.
Iranians took to the streets of Tehran late Saturday, cheering, clapping, and playing music after reports that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had died. Videos verified by AFP showed residents honking car horns, launching fireworks, and applauding from their windows. The celebration began even before US President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social declaring Khamenei one of the most evil people in history. Iranian officials have not confirmed his death, while some insisting he remains alive. The scenes of jubilation comes weeks after a violent crackdown on mass protests that left thousands dead.
Here we go. I got to remove him from the screen. Wait a minute. What's really going on? Oh, my bad. Hold up. All right, something fishy going on here. I, for some reason, I can't. Let me see what I'm doing. All the noise you hearing is Pastor Damon. I just letting everybody. Okay. Yeah, yeah. You're on the panel. I just can't put everybody on the panel for some reason. I don't know what I did to mess this up, but that's okay. I got a third clip to show you guys um, of Iranian celebrate in the streets. This is amazing.
I really want to thank President Trump for standing behind the people. He made a promise to the Iranian people. He kept that promise. And I want the American people to know this is not a war against Iran. It's a liberation for the Iranian people. And I wish everyone the best.
Thank you. People are happy. You see how much we dance. The news came out less than 3 hours. People gathered together here to celebrate, dance. Not just here, you can see all over the world. Even in Iran, Montreal, Sydney, Toronto, LA, everywhere in the world are dancing, cheering, and everyone is happy.
I was prepared for it, being honest with you. I knew it was coming, we just didn't know when. So I was more excited than shocked. And I was very happy that the United States is supporting the people of Iran.
Wow. Wow. Okay, Pastor Damon dropped out, popped out. So, like I said, I'm still waiting on William Federer. He texted me. I told him I'm in the studio. Come on, we're waiting. It's not too late. And so basically, as you can see, it's amazing how the people of Iran are happy. Those who fled Iran are in America. They're happy about what's happening right now. Whereas those, I don't know what's going on with these leftists, with Democrats. They're upset. How can you be upset? Okay, how can you be upset with, and these people are happy? That's the part that's getting me. You're upset, and these people are happy. Ted, have you been following this?
My point of view, I understand the power of deception. As you know, I lived 12 years transgender, and the deceptions are so strong, considering the things that I did, which I look back now and can't believe anyone would ever do.
Mm-hmm.
This deception, I wouldn't say is quite that strong, but they're just literally brainwashed or under spirit. They are under a spirit of deception. And, when you're in there, as I say, when you're deceived, you don't know you're deceived.
Right.
And they are deceived and they don't know it. And it takes a very, very powerful coming to Jesus moment or coming to reality moment to get out of it. And when you realize our education system, our news system just pumps them full of this stuff, you're normie, that's what they believe. I mean, it's sad but true.
Right.
I mean, I scratch my head like you, but also understand having come out of a strong delusion, deception, how powerful it can be.
Amen. I was the thing the thing that got me was at first it just said Trump bombed Iran, and then shortly afterward, it's a coordinated effort between Israel and the United States. As soon as that second, as soon as the second carrier group showed up in the Middle East, I just knew something was getting ready to happen. Being in the Navy and going out with carrier groups, we just don't. When we do 6-month cruises, we are there to protect our interests.
Yep.
In that area, and as they tried to attack Israel, after Israel attacked, they actually hit 400 targets. The American carrier group shot down multiple missiles that were headed for Israel. Okay, the professor is here. We're still waiting on Bill Federer. He texted me. He said he asked, "Was this too late?" I said, "No, come on. I'm in the studio waiting on you." So I went live. Kevin. Okay, he watching a movie. How you gonna pop in watching a movie? But that's okay. It's okay. Um, Another thing, people need to understand is that Iran is a part of the prophecies in Revelation. Correct me if I'm wrong. They are the modern. I think it's Persia or Babylon. Hold on, let me get him. Kevin.
Persia.
Is Persia. Okay. So
Elam.
Iran is basically modern day Persia. Iraq is Babylon. And so
Okay, got it wrong.
Yeah, and the thing that also gets me is that they didn't just attack Israel; they attacked some of their other neighbors, wherever our bases are in the Middle East. They attacked them too. So what they did was they got um, they got Qatar involved, Saudi Arabia involved, and so now, oh great! Apparently, everybody's having technical difficulties. Okay, so Pastor Damon says he sees himself in the studio. Did you click on the newest link that I sent you or old link? Let me see something here. Oh man, I can't even leave this site. No, I ain't trying to do none of that. Okay, so Pastor Damon can hear.
If I remember correctly, Obadiah only has 21 verses.
Right. And it talks about how they were a thorn in Israel's side. They cheered when Israel got attacked. They even helped in some of the attacks. And yes, they no longer exist.
Yeah, they're standing there with pom poms and whatnot, right, with a marching band every time that Israel is attacked. you know,
Right.
and they're enjoying it and whatnot, right? They're selling tickets, and
Right.
so Israel wins. Just as
Mhm.
often as they lose, it all depends on their obedience or disobedience at the time. But but Satan is consistently attacking them throughout the Old Testament through one group or another in order to not only kill them all off, but to eventually kill the Messiah, who had
Right.
not been born.
All right. So now that we've done that, we're going to bring in the expert.
Oh, see, Bill Federer just popped in.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Well, good evening. I just finished up another interview, and I thought I'd spend a few minutes with you before I have to run.
Oh man, thank
So
you,
what have you been talking about?
Islam.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
That
Bill,
was one of
I have a question for you.
yeah.
Okay. How is Islam compatible with socialism since we have an Islamic and now since now we have an Islamic socialist mayor up in New York? How is Islam compatible with socialism?
Great question. They both want a one world government, and they're happy to use each other against us. And then afterwards, they sort of will fight it out. Um, uh, Interesting. So the Ottoman Empire existed for 700 years. After World War One, it's disbanded. And you have a lot of the Muslim world wanting to be more Western, like Ataturk in Turkey and Gamal Nasser in Egypt, and but then you have the Muslim Brotherhood being started in 1928, and they decided to infiltrate countries and assassinate leaders who were becoming too Western. But then you have 1960, and this is when the Palestinian Liberation Organization was formed in Moscow by the Soviet Union. And then they got a radical Muslim named Yasser Arafat to head it up. And so you see this combining of socialism and socialist tactics with radical Islam. And it's a very volatile combination. So after World War II, you saw countries coming into existence in Europe and in India and Egypt, and they set republics, and they were like happy that they could be free. But the Soviets didn't like that. So they would send in agents to do what's called critical theory. That's where you observe all the groups in a country, ethnic groups, Bosnians, Croats, Serbs, religious groups, Sunni, Shia, Orthodox, economic group, racial groups, and they would categorize them as victims and oppressors, haves and have-nots, and then they would pit them against each other and orchestrate protests that they would escalate into riots and violence. Why violence? Because then people think emotionally. It's like liquid cement. It's like they want to blame somebody, and then they co-opt the media to blame the new leader of the new country for all the problems, and his popularity falls. And then they do a coup and replace him with a Soviet puppet, and the dust settles, and now they're behind the Iron Curtain. And so the Soviets would go into country after country and do this destabilizing. And so in 1960, they formed the Palestinian Liberation Organization for the sole purpose of sowing division in the Middle East so it would not become pro-American. And so you see this mixing together of Islamic fundamentalism with Yasser Arafat together with the Soviet tactics.
I'm pausing it right there so you understand that Russia is now helping Iran in this conflict. This is how world wars start.
And anyway, that's what we're seeing happen in New York.
Well, Bill, I got one more question. How does Islam and the Catholic Church, how does, let everybody know how that union began and it's still there?
Yeah. Well, so go back to Muhammad. He was born in 570 AD. His father dies before. So let's back up a little bit further. The entire Mediterranean world is Christian. It's Roman Empire that becomes Christian with Constantine, and the capital is now moved to Constantinople. And so you have a Christian Roman Empire that's all of North Africa, all the Middle East, all of Turkey, and then Europe. And then its biggest enemy was Persia. And so they beat each other up and leave a power vacuum. So Muhammad is born in 570 AD. His father dies before he's born. His mother dies when he's 6. His grandfather, guardian, dies when he's 8. He's orphaned, taken in by an uncle, Abu Talib, who's a merchant. And he goes on camel rides to different cities. And Muhammad hears about the different religions. They go to Persia, and they hear about the Zoroastrian religion that taught that paradise was filled full of virgins that would fulfill all guys' desires. Muhammad likes this. It gets incorporated into his belief system that paradise is filled full of virgins. The Zoroastrians also believed in jinns or genies, like Aladdin's lamp or 1001 Arabian Nights. And so that got incorporated into Islam. And then the Muhammad would go to some of the Sabaean cities in southern Arabia. And they're the ones that were into cutting off hands and female circumcision and stoning Satan and these different things. And so some of those things got incorporated into Islam. And then there's the pagan faith. And so in Mecca, they had a square building called the Kaaba that housed 360 different pagan gods. And the most popular was Hubal, the moon god. And their calendar began with the first sight of the crescent moon over the desert. And they had this rock. It was a meteor hitting the hot desert sands, and it melted into this rock. And so these pagans would kiss the rock, walk around it, and bow to it. And Muhammad kissed that rock, and it got incorporated into Muhammad's belief system. And then there's the Jewish faith with the Talmud and Mishnah. And some of those stories got verbatim incorporated into Islam. And then there is the Christian faith and the Catholic faith. But in that Kaaba, what I told you, they had a statue of Mary and baby Jesus. And so Muhammad thought that the Trinity was the Father, Mary, and Jesus. Nobody explained to him the Holy Spirit. And
Oh no.
even Encyclopedia Britannica says the gospel was made known to Muhammad through apocryphal and heretical sources. And so what's apocryphal? That's the infancy gospel of Thomas, written by someone who knew nothing of Jewish life. It was written several centuries after Jesus and has these fanciful little stories of Jesus being a kid, making clay birds and clapping, and they flew away, and raising a playmate from the dead. And Muhammad heard these stories, and they got incorporated into Islam as fact. And so we can see all these ingredients that go into there. And Muhammad, he's 25 years old, and he's working for a wealthy widow named Khadijah. She's 40, and she's widowed twice, and she marries Muhammad. And so now Muhammad doesn't have to work, and he goes out into caves and prays, which is what the Christians were doing. It's a movement called Pietism that said if you're really a Christian, you should give away your money and live in a cave as a hermit or join a monastery. Or they call them the Desert Fathers, where they'd build a platform in the desert, climb on top, bake in the sun, thinking they're denying their flesh and getting holier. But it was all this me-focused salvation, and sort of neglected what kind of country you're going to let your kids inherit. Anyway, Muhammad goes to a cave and prays, and a spirit appears to him and squeezes him and commands him to read. He said, "I cannot read." Spirit squeezes him a second time, said, "Read." He said, "I cannot read." It happens a third time. And then Muhammad began to recite. And that's how the Quran came to him. He'd get these verses, and he'd have them memorized and teach them to his followers. Muhammad was illiterate. The word Quran means recitation. It's an oral thing. People say, how can somebody that's illiterate memorize all these verses? Well, in Arabic, they had a little rhyme to them, very similar to rap music today, right? So maybe somebody, right, in school, they learn all these rap songs and treat women a certain way, treat police a certain way. Anyway, Muhammad goes to his wife, Khadijah, and he tells her that he thinks he's demon possessed. And she decides to test the spirit by removing her veils and her robes. And she said, "Can you still see the spirit?" He goes, "Yes, over there." And finally, she put his head under her shift, whatever that meant, and said, "Can you see the spirit?" And he said, "No." And so she said, "Well, it must have been from God, because it was embarrassed to look upon me without all my veils on." That was the test. Now, in the Bible, we know the test is every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is the Christ is of Antichrist. But Muhammad was illiterate. He never knew that. Anyway, she, the wife, takes Muhammad to her cousin, who's an Ebionite Christian priest of the heretical sect. And Ebionism says Jesus was a man, he was a created being. And so he tells Muhammad maybe the spirit is the one that appeared to Moses in the wilderness, and then he dies, and so Muhammad's left with his spirit. And so he gets verses, and if you study the history, he incorporates pieces of other faiths in hopes that that faith will join him. And so one is a city where they worship three daughter gods, and he gets these verses from the three daughter gods. Well, the town doesn't convert, and he wages war and kills them all. And then the people say, "Well, what about those verses you got from the three daughter gods?" He goes, "Oh, those were from Satan." So they call them satanic verses. And
Is that what Salman Rushdie was dealing with? Salman
Yeah.
Rushdie, the satanic verses. Okay.
And then Muhammad had him bowing toward Jerusalem. But when the Jews rejected him, he changed the direction toward Mecca. Anyway, he goes into the town of Mecca in 610 AD, and he only makes 70 converts in 12 years. And so he gets very confrontational, and they chase him out of town for disturbing the peace. He tries going to a city called Al Taif. They pelt him with rocks and stones, and little kids jeer him out of town. And so in the year 622 AD, his wife dies, and he calls it his year of sorrows. So he goes north to a Jewish city called Medina. And 3 Jewish clans control Medina, and they let Muhammad in as a Muslim immigrant, the first ever. He goes into the minority neighborhoods and begins to organize a following, sort of like a community organizer. And when his following gets big enough, he pressures the Jews to accommodate him and his followers politically. And they do. They make a treaty. So now Muhammad's a political leader in addition to being a religious leader. And then Muhammad's followers get chased out of Mecca for disturbing the peace. And now you have lots of Muslim immigrants coming to Medina. The Jews are nice and let him in. And Muhammad allows his followers to rob the caravans headed to Mecca in retaliation for the Meccans chasing him out of town. So where Jesus said, if they take your coat, give them your shirt, Muhammad's was this victimhood, right? If they take your house, you retaliate, take their caravan. And so he gets verses from his Allah that he gets a fifth of the booty from robbing caravans. And then he had one verse that says, Allah has given you the slave girls as your booty. And so they would rob the caravans, and he tells his men, you can have 4 wives plus as many extra women as your right hand possesses. So you can come away from battle with extra concubines and slave wives, and so the Meccans send 1,000 soldiers to protect their caravan, and Muhammad defeats them with 300. So he's outnumbered 3-1, and he wins. It's the Battle of Badra in 624 AD. And then the Meccans send 10,000 soldiers to Medina to stop Muhammad. And Muhammad digs potholes all around the city, which renders the cavalry of the Meccans useless. You can't charge your horses and camels across a field full of potholes. They'll break their legs. And so Muhammad goes to some of the Meccans at night, bribes them, they slip away. Goes to some of the other Meccans at night, threatens them, and they slip away. Sort of the bribe and the bullet. Then it gets freezing cold for a week, and the rest of the Meccans lose heart and go home. And Muhammad considers this a great victory, that his enemies were cowards. He goes back into that Jewish city of Medina, and he gets offended at one of the Jewish tribes, confiscates their property, chases them out of town. And then the other 2 tribes keep their heads low and say, well, he's not going to notice us. And now there's 2 Jewish tribes. He gets offended at the smaller of the 2, confiscates their property, chases them out of town. And the big Jewish tribe was, well, they were always competition for me. And now there's only 1 Jewish tribe. And the Hadith said Muhammad was taking a bath, and a spirit appeared to him and said, how can you rest when Allah's enemies are in your midst? He said, where? And it points at that last Jewish neighborhood. So he bottles them in their neighborhood for 25 days. When they surrender, he brings them into the market and chops off their heads and sells the women and children into slavery. So within 5 years of Muhammad coming into the Jewish city of Medina as an immigrant, there is not a Jew left in the city of Medina. They were chased out, killed, or enslaved. So it's a 3-step process: immigrate, increase, eliminate. Immigrate as a Muslim refugee, as a Muslim immigrant. Go into the minority neighborhoods and get a following, and then get elected in politics. And then you have random outbreaks of violence, and the non-Muslims feel unsafe and move out of the neighborhood, and they take over. And so you see this pattern, this immigrate, increase, eliminate. They'll move into a neighborhood. They'll take advantage of the niceness of the host country, and then they'll begin to gather a political following, and then they'll have random outbreaks of violence, and the non-Muslims move out. So it's a 1,400-year track to see how Egypt used to be Christian for 6 centuries until the Muslim leader Amir ibn al-As invaded. How did it happen? Well, you had the Byzantine Christians persecuting the Coptic Christians. Coptic is the Egyptian word for Egyptian. And so again, like you had the 3 Jewish tribes, here you got these 2 Christian groups. And the Muslims say to the Coptics, we'll help you drive out those Byzantines. And they go, really? Come on in. Help our party against the other party. Once they come in, they cut out the tongues of anybody caught speaking Coptic. They eradicate an entire national language and bring in Arabic. And then they conquered Jerusalem in the 638 AD. And then they conquered Syria. Syria was the first country to completely be Christian, evangelized by the Apostle Paul. The name Christian was first used in Syria until Caliph Umar conquers it. Then they conquer into Armenia. And then all of North Africa was Christian St. Augustine of Hippo was from Carthage, right? He was a Berber. And you have the Christians teaching themselves not to get involved in politics. It was their version of separation of church and state, this pietism. And so the Umayyad Muslims just bowled across North Africa unopposed. And then in the year 711, 70,000 Muslims cross the Strait of Gibraltar and conquer Spain. And so the Muslim general was called Tariq, and he lands at a mountain, and the name for mountain is Jabal. So they called it Jabal Tariq or Gibraltar, right?
Oh, wow.
And so the 70,000, they have stirrups and scimitar swords. Europeans are still fighting on foot, but they do the same thing. They pick on one Christian kingdom, and the other ones stand back and say, well, there was always competition for me, and I never got along with them. And then they pick on another kingdom, and the other ones stand back, and one by one, they pick them all off until they conquer all of Spain in 10 years. Then they cross the Pyrenees, they conquer southern France. They're finally stopped outside of Paris at the Battle of Tours in 732 AD, just 100 years after the death of Muhammad in 632 AD. They go from Arabia to Paris in a 100-year military campaign. And they did it because there's a unique combination of motivations, lust and religious fervor. Who would have thought that you could combine those two? So you can go into battle, you get 4 wives, as many extra women as your right hand possesses, you die, you get 72 women, it's a sex party, all right? And at the same time, you're being religious. It's an amazing combination of human motivations.
Can I ask the question? What happened with India and Pakistan?
Right, so in 691, you have a Muslim leader conquers Jerusalem, and then they begin to conquer into India and Pakistan. And ironically enough, the Hindus had lots of gods, and they mentally could not conceive of an exclusive religion. And so when the Muslims first come into northern India, they're like, oh, another religion, another god, fine, we got lots of them. The water's warm, jump in, right? They actually helped the Muslims build some of their first mosques. But when the Muslims came in and they started beheading and killing the Hindus and the Sikhs, that's when they're like, so it's like today, the left is so tolerant. Oh, we want to tolerate everybody. Any type of sexual agenda, we'll tolerate. They literally cannot conceive that you could actually tolerate somebody that wants to kill you. And so Islam came into northern India and then killed like estimated millions. They call it the Kush, the Hindu Kush, and the word for Kush means slaughter. You had Shah Jahan. He's the one that built the Taj Mahal in the 1600s, and he wanted to be a Ghazi, which is a Muslim warrior. And he says, "Where are the infidels, so I may kill them?" And they said, "Well, the Sikhs." And so he sent his army in there, and they would just behead them as fast as they could find them, like tens of thousands of them. And like Tamerlane in the 1300s, he killed 17 million, but he had a Quran so big they had to carry it around in a wheelbarrow. He told his men to come back with a head in every hand, so they decapitate and leave piles of skulls. And
Wow. Hold up, real quick. Hold up, Bill. Apostle Jolly, you got anything?
Nah, I don't know too much about Islam or the Quran, but I just know about the Bible. That's
I got you.
Well,
I got you.
I'm just listening. So I'm just listening.
yeah. Well, that's actually they say when they're trying to find counterfeit dollars, they study the real thing, and then they'll notice the fake one, but they don't study the fake ones because it'll mess up their mind, right? And so it's best just to study the Bible. I did put a comparison in my book. The title of my book is "What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran." What every American needs to know about the Quran. My website is AmericanMinute.com. And so I compared Jesus. So the largest religion in the world is Christianity, about a third. Second largest religion in the world is Islam, about a quarter. Followed by atheism, followed by Buddhism, followed by Hinduism, down to 0.2% Jewish. But the two largest religions in the world are Christianity and Islam. And people say, well, Muslims kill people, Christians kill people, every religion has crazies that kill people. It's like, let's not compare followers, Let's compare founders. Jesus never killed anybody. Muhammad killed an estimated 3,000 people in 66 battles and raids. Jesus never owned slaves. Muhammad owned slaves. He was a white Arab. There are hadiths that say Muhammad was the white man reclining on the couch. Another hadith says that somebody saw him lift his arms to pray, and they said, I saw the whiteness of the prophet's armpits. Another one, he's riding on his donkey, rubs up against Muhammad's donkey, and he says, I saw the whiteness of the prophet's thigh. And Muhammad owned black slaves like Bilal. And so Jesus never married. Muhammad had anywhere from 11 to 22 wives. His youngest was Aisha, the 6-year-old. He had a dream 2 days in a row of marrying the 6-year-old daughter of his general Abu Bakr. And the general said, well, you're the prophet. Here she is. And and so in the hadith, Aisha says that she was playing in the backyard, and the Muslim women came and got her and took a rag and washed her face, and then said, Allah's blessings and good luck. And she said, the prophet visited me that afternoon. I was 9 years old. And so Jesus...
Well, we would call that a pedophile today, right? See Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. And Jesus never tortured anybody. Well, Muhammad conquered the city of Khaybar, and the chief wouldn't tell where the treasure was hidden. So Muhammad had him stretched out on the ground, and they kindled a fire on his chest. Jesus never led armies. Muhammad and the rightly guided caliphs led armies. And Jesus taught God was our Father. In Islam, it's blasphemy to call Allah your Father. Jesus taught we're children of God. In Islam, Allah has no children. He took no wife and has no son. Jesus taught we're made in the image of God. In Islam, Allah has no image. Jesus taught to have a personal relationship with God. In Islam, it's blasphemy to even want to have a personal relationship with Allah. Even in the next life, you will never meet him. He's forever unknowable. Yet Jesus said, and this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. The first 3 centuries of Christianity, there are 10 major persecutions. Christians are thrown to the lions. They never led an armed resistance against the Roman emperor. First 3 centuries of Islam, they conquered from Arabia to Paris. Jesus said, go to a town, preach the gospel. If they don't receive you, shake the dust and leave. Mohammed's go to a town. If they don't receive you, wage war on the town. Matter of fact, it's interesting that Jesus will forgive any sin. But in Islam, they say that the only way you can be guaranteed, so Muhammad didn't know what was going to happen to him. He said, though I'm the prophet of Allah, I don't know what Allah will do with me. There's no security. And so the one thing that they teach is that if you die while you are killing an innocent person, an infidel, you're guaranteed to go to paradise. Well, if there was one sin that could guarantee you'd go to hell, it would be what? It's like, well, wait a second. Jesus will forgive any sin. But what happens if you commit a murder and you intentionally die in the process? You're not alive afterwards to ask Jesus to forgive you. That would be sort of one of those questionable things. So what they think will guarantee them paradise may, in fact, be guaranteeing them hell. Anyway, it's a flip of, there's a Supreme Court Justice, Robert Jackson, in like 1958, and he said, Islamic law is the antithesis of Western law. Antithesis means the complete opposite. So in Islam, if a man rapes a woman, it's the woman's fault for allowing herself to be used as a tool of Satan to tempt the man. So the woman has to wear the burqa to look unattractive on purpose, because if she gets raped, it's her fault. And so in Islam, they whip the woman 100 times if she gets raped. Well, in the West, if a woman gets raped, we punish the rapist. We don't punish the woman, right? And so it's the exact opposite in Islam.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Wow. Listen, I don't think my other two panel guests have heard. I don't think they've heard this, but I have. And the way you, even the questions that you that were given to you, you went straight back to it. I've heard this maybe 100 times, and it's helped me when witnessing to people. And it's amazing. It's amazing what people just don't know, and then they try to throw up history, and I'm like, what year was that written? Oh, this was written 3-4 years ago. I'm like, yeah, the stuff I've been reading is over 100, 200 years old. I think I'll believe them because they're closer to what happened versus what you're reading. You know, and then I got a question, but right now I'm asking God to bring it to the front of my head and not leave it in the middle. That one question was, um, his first wife, his first wife, was she Catholic?
Um, I don't think she was. She was Ebionite, which was a heretical Christian sect. But he did marry. There was a one of his wives named Mary, and I think she was Catholic. So uh, it's interesting. He would get verses from his Allah on an as needed basis. So he had a special night with each wife, and then he captures Mary, and he's skipping the night with one to be with her, and so the other wife gets upset, and she organizes a boycott, and so Muhammad gets a verse from his Allah that says, "O consorts of the Prophet, if any of you act unseemingly to the Prophet, it will be double punishment for her, and this is easy for Allah to do." So it's like, okay, I guess we have to let him switch it up anytime he wants, right? Um,
Mm.
and then sometimes if a wife didn't feel that she was up for getting in the room with him, they would push in Aisha, the 6-year-old that was now 9 years old, and she ended up being one of Muhammad's favorite wives. And um, but yeah, but it's interesting how Islamic law developed. So Aisha, the 9-year-old, was on a caravan with Muhammad, and it stopped, and she went over the sand dune to relieve herself, and comes back, and the caravan's gone. And a straggler on a donkey sees her, picks her on the donkey, and takes her to Muhammad. And the Muslim men said, "Well, you got to kill the guy because he must have raped her." And the little girl said, "He didn't rape me." So Muhammad said, "Well, there's a new rule. You have to have 4 witnesses of a rape, otherwise it never happened.
There you go.
And
Go.
an infidel cannot witness against a Muslim. So if a Muslim man rapes a non-Muslim, doesn't matter how many witnesses. And then they do it with boys, and they do it with goats, and they do it with anything. They just consider themselves super macho. They think the homosexual is the person on the receiving end. The guy doing it doesn't consider himself homosexual. He just considers himself super macho, right? And so it's
Now,
it's a
now, okay. I'm. They don't know where I'm going. I'm gonna go here. Tell the story about Dearborn, Michigan.
Henry Ford did not like unions, and so he brought in Muslims to break the unions. He was going around the world looking for different sources of rubber and so forth, and he's over there in the Middle East, and a Yemeni uh, Muslim man puts his luggage on the boat, and Henry Ford says, "Show up in Detroit, and I'll pay you $5 a day." And so word spreads, and you have all these Muslims beginning to show up in Detroit, and Henry Ford hires them, and they wouldn't unionize. And they worked really hard, and they built really good cars. But they decide to build the first mosque in America. and now it is a mega mosque. I've been by it, and so now you have this Muslim community there, and again, the first generation, they just were happy to be in America and work hard. But the younger generation is now being moved upon to become more fundamental. Now, there's some important definitions. The word Islam means submission to the will of Allah. A Muslim is one who has submitted to the will of Allah, and they think there will be world peace when the whole world submits to the will of Allah. So, to a fundamental Muslim, world peace means world Islam. So, when they say it's a religion of peace, it's code for it's a religion of world Islam. And so they think when the whole world submits to the will of Allah, there'll be peace. So when you and I say peace, we think different groups getting along. When they say peace, it's world Islam. There's a quote from Lincoln during the Civil War, and he said, "We all declare for liberty, but in using the same word, we do not all mean the same thing. When the South says liberty, it's kicking the Northern troops out. When the North says liberty, it's freeing the slaves." Right? It's the
That's
same
right.
word, but two different meanings. So when we say peace, we think it's different groups getting along. When they say peace, they mean world Islam. And so they divide the world in two: the half that has submitted and the half that's in the process of submitting. It's called the Dar al-Islam and the Dar al-Harb. And so the Dar al-Islam is the house of submission, and the Dar al-Harb is the house of war. It's supposed to be at war because it's in the process of submitting. And so what about moderate Muslims? Moderate Muslims believe the world will submit to Allah later, maybe in the distant future, maybe at the end of the world. And since it's so far off, they really don't think about it. They just want to live their lives and have their family, and they're happy to have you as a neighbor. And most of the Muslims fall into that category. The fundamental Muslim thinks the world is supposed to submit to Allah now, and they're really excited, and they want to help make it happen. The dilemma for us in the West is the nicer we show ourselves and the more accommodating and the more we let them get involved and honor them and let them run for office and get elected, the fundamental Muslim thinks that it's really happening now rather than later, and they pressure the moderate ones to become more fundamental. And so we see this pattern happening. So in Islam, they have a saying: when your enemy is strong, retreat. When your enemy is weak, attack. And so whenever they would lose a battle, they would retreat and become less aggressive for a generation or two. But then when they would do some probing attacks and nobody would slap them down, then they would say it's time to get into the aggressive mode again. And so after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire was destroyed, you had a lot of the Muslim world become more moderate. Ataturk in Turkey, he was a secular leader. He outlawed the fezzes and the burqas and the Qurans and all that. And he calls to prayer. And he said, Mohammedanism is nothing more than Arab politics. It may have suited tribes in the desert. It is no good for a modern progressive state. And so Ataturk helped the leader of Afghanistan and the Shah in Iran, all to become more westernized. And if you see pictures, there's like beauty pageants in Syria. Gamal Nasser is on Time magazine, and the Cairo beaches look like Southern California with girls in swimming suits. And you would have thought that the world is moving in the westerly direction. But the problem was the Muslim Brotherhood was started in 1928. And they based their goal on the two cities Muhammad lived in, Mecca and Medina. And Mecca, Muhammad was a religious leader. In Medina, Muhammad becomes a political and a military leader. So the Muslim Brotherhood says, okay, first stage is the Meccan phase. Go into all these countries and just pretend like you're a religious Muslim. But then when the signal's given, you switch and become a political and militant Muslim and do assassinations. And so that's what they would do. They would go into countries and just be a religious Muslim refugee. But then when they would build their community and it would get big enough and they would get emboldened, then they'd switch and get involved in politics. And then you see random outbreaks of violence and acid attacks and knifings on subways, and the previous inhabitants of the neighborhood no longer feel safe and they move out, and the Muslims are left controlling the neighborhood. And
Wow.
All right, I got one more for you. Explain the Barbary Wars with the Tripoli pirates and General Eaton and all of that with the war with I think Jefferson, and then the War of 1812 and all of that madness that was going on back then.
Yeah, so the Muhammad robbed caravans, and then when the Muslims were on the Mediterranean Sea, they would rob ships. Matter of fact, they cut off all the trade. They were robbing so many ships that no longer was papyrus shipped from Egypt to Europe. Papyrus were reeds that grew along the Nile Delta that they would put in water and weave them together and turn into paper. So there's a paper shortage in Europe in the 700s. They wrote fewer books. This is called the Dark Ages. So Islam is responsible for Europe entering the Dark Ages. But they conquered all of North Africa and cut off the trade. And they would have pirates. In the year 846 AD, 11,000 Muslim pirates invaded Rome, Italy. And they trashed the Basilica of St. Peter's, and they trashed the bones of St. Peter and St. Paul. It was after that that Pope Leo built a 39-foot wall around the Vatican. But the Muslims were raiding the coast of Europe and carrying away slaves. And so there were whole Catholic orders in Europe called the Trinitarians, and they would collect alms and donations and use the money to go under a white flag to North Africa and ransom a friend back. Miguel de Cervantes, that wrote Man of La Mancha, Don Quixote, he was captured by the Muslims and made a slave in North Africa and ransomed back by the Trinitarians. Another was St. Vincent de Paul. He was captured by the Muslims and made a slave. He was witnessing to one of his master's wives, and she converts and nags her husband to let him go. And so he goes back to Europe and starts a group to raise money to ransom slaves, and he starts a hospital. And so that's where you get the St. Vincent de Paul hospitals. And but then the Muslims enslaved tens of millions of Africans. And they would castrate the men, make them eunuchs, and they'd put the women into their harems, and they would sell them throughout the Ottoman Empire. The Timbuktu, where the canoe meets the caravan, the Niger River, was a big slave market. Khartoum was a big slave market. Tanzania, the Zanzibar coast was a big slave market. And even David Livingstone, the Scottish missionary to the Congo, would write about going through a valley and witnessing to the villages and coming back a year or two later, and they're ghost villages. The whole valley was cleaned out because the Arab Muslim slave traders would come in. And he said that one time he stumbled across a line of 1,000 Africans shackled together, being forced to march 500 miles to the coast to be sold into slavery. And he said if they walked too slow, they would just stab them or tie them to a tree and let them die. And he says you could tell where the slave trails were by looking for the vultures circling. Somebody had given David Livingstone a little steam paddle boat to go up one of the rivers. He said that the Arab slave traders, if the slaves weren't marching fast enough, they'd just throw them in the river. And he says that his little paddle boat would break because it would hit the bodies of the slaves that the Arabs would throw in. And so in South Africa, the Arabs called the Africans kafirs, which means infidel. And so that's the South African word for the equivalent of the N-word. You do not want to say kafir in your, but it's interesting, a little trivia. Ethiopia was the one country in Africa to stay Christian, right? This was part of Sheba, the Queen of Sheba, and then later the Ethiopian eunuch, but it was a big empire called the Ascomite Empire. And it was huge for centuries. The Horn of Africa, today it's, Ethiopia and Somalia and Eritrea and Djibouti and all that area. But back then it was Ethiopia. And so the story is a goat herder boy. The goats ate from some bush and started getting erratic, and the bush they took the beans from the bush and they would cook it, and it was coffee. But the Arabs called it the kafir bean or the infidel bean. And so the word kafir ended up being pronounced coffee. And but they wouldn't let him leave Africa without being roasted. So they didn't want any of the Europeans to be able to steal it. But after the Battle of Vienna on September 11, 1683, the Polish king Jan Sobieski wins and drives away the Muslims, and they leave their tents with bags of beans, the kafir beans, the coffee beans. They weren't sure if they should drink it, so they took a cup of it to Pope Clement, and he tasted it and said, "This is too good to leave for the Muslims. Let's baptize it." And then it spread across Europe. And,
And now we have Folgers today. I got you.
And Starbucks.
yeah. But the Barbary pirates. So the Muslims would raid ships, and so the Europeans would pay an annual tribute. So England, France, Italy, Sweden would pay annual tribute to the Muslim pirates to leave their country's ships alone. And when America breaks from Britain, we are no longer covered by the tribute payment. And so that's when so the day after Jefferson was elected president, the third president, he gets a demand from the Pasha of Tripoli for $250,000 extortion tribute payment. And Jefferson said, "I did the only reasonable thing. I sent in a squadron of our Navy and Marines, and it's called the Barbary Pirate Wars." And so you have Preble and Eaton, and they're very courageous, and they fight and they win, but right while they're winning, the negotiator basically swaps out and says, "Well, we'll support one of these Muslims if you just sign this treaty." And the one Muslim leader said, "I'll sign your treaty, but it's waste paper. As soon as you leave, I'm going to break it." And so in Islam, they have a thing called hudna. It's their word for treaty. And it's when you're weak, you make treaties until you get strong enough to disregard them. So they don't view a treaty as a permanent thing. It's just a time to regroup. And even Stephen Decatur said Algerians were believed to be masters of duplicity, willing to make agreements and break them when they found convenient. And
Wow. Wow. Oh my goodness. I told Kevin and an apostle that I would even if you came on late, I would extend the show. Reason being is because you have so much information, and when the last question we call Kevin Professor Uncle. And when he asked the last question, you went right into my last question. So, I mean, it was answered, and what people just need to know is, the Muslims that are here, it's strategic, like you said. They get into government as politicians, and then they implement what the Quran says. I heard about a Muslim officer killing a lady at a traffic stop, and basically nobody was a witness to what happened at the traffic stop. And this is real. People need to understand this, and we need to also understand that that God is still on the throne. Everything is being done. He knows. He's watching, and what we need to do is continue to watch. And people get mad at me when I say you're supposed to be a watcher. You're not you don't want to pay attention to what's going on in politics. You don't want to pay attention to what's going on with the crime in the country. But the Bible tells you need to be a watcher. It talks about these things.
One interesting thing I had it explained to me that in Europe, the Muslim men will come in and put a wife in every apartment. So they can have 4 wives. Mm-hmm. And the wives go down to the welfare office and say, "My husband is not around," and they get welfare checks. And the Muslim man will visit his wives, and the more children they have, the larger the welfare checks get.
That's right.
And so he's living like a king with his harem. and he's milking the system. And so it's a social stigma for a Muslim woman to have less than 5 kids. And so the Europeans are having maybe 1 kid. And so
Yep.
they estimate by 2030, just population-wise, the Muslims can vote in Sharia law. And now I wanted to share one thing, Cain versus Abel.
Okay.
So Islam is the religion of Cain. So Cain wanted to worship God, but he did it through his works. And we know it's works because God told Adam, the ground is cursed for your sake, and you'll bring forth fruit by the sweat of your brow. Sweat is work. And so Cain is a tiller of the soil. He's bringing forth stuff out of the ground. He's sweating thorns and thistles. He's trying to work his way to heaven. And if you do works, you can be proud of your works because you're doing more than the brother. And God resisted Cain's offering. God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And so when Cain's works were rejected, it says his countenance fell. His pride was hurt. He was embarrassed. And he gets filled full of hatred and anger, wants to murder his brother. That has the revelation of the Lamb. So it's almost like the spiritual descendants of Cain are always trying to kill the spiritual descendant of Abel. And every religion of works falls into the religion of Cain, but Islam is the ultimate, right? There's no lamb in the Islamic theology. It's just works, and you never know if you did enough, right? But historically, the Jews and Christians believed in the Lamb, all right? We just know his name's Jesus. So
That's
they
right.
believed in the Lamb to come. We believe in the Lamb that came, but salvation is through the Lamb. If you're trusting in the Lamb, you're implicitly acknowledging you're insufficient in yourself. It's like God's on one side and he's just, and we're on the other side and we're sinners. Our sin separates from God, and the Lamb pays for the sin and restores us to a relationship with God. So the Lamb takes the punishment instead of us taking the punishment. But it's humbling to acknowledge you need help. So Abel was humble and Cain was prideful. Islam is a religion of pride. They call it honor, but it's pride, and pride's the sin of Satan. And so it's almost like throughout history, whether it's, whatever different Middle Ages or whatever, but as far as Islam go, it fits the bill. The 2 other big religions are Buddhism and Hinduism. They were created before Jesus, so they do not mention Jesus by name.
That's right.
Islam was created 600 years after Jesus, and Islam specifically says, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, the Christ, you have committed the unforgivable sin that condemns you to hell. You cannot.
That was Bill Federer. He's been on our show multiple times since the end of the year, the beginning of the year. He's a historian. He's got multiple books. His website is theamericanminute.com. If you want to check out his stuff, he is awesome. Right now, I gotta go. It's the summertime, so people taking breaks, they chilling out, they hanging out. But if I want this to grow, I got to do the work. So thank you all, Carmen, Deborah, Tam G, and all those who were just watching. I thank you. And guess what? I got to catch a flight. So,
at least internationally, travel
Go
to
to London, Paris, Tokyo, Japan, go to New York, LA, Chi-Town.